Kwai kwai ni tomak. Indo Luigi Souza, Parano Kirahozi. Undai Saratoga aro bezon big. Tadalon dakaden. Hello, my friends. My name is Joseph, or the Peaceful One. I am from the place called Saratoga, or the Medicine Spring Place. Alnobania, a human being is what I am. Atakiaka, so are you. With me is my son Jesse. We're going to share with you a number of things tonight in a program we call Two Canoes. We'll talk a little bit about that. But before we go into that, we'll talk a little bit, and I'll let Jesse do that, about how the canoe ties into our greeting song, which we'll then share with you. Kwai kwai. Kwai kwai ni dombak. Nian kizi kluzi alnombai. It's good. I speak a little bit of the Abenaki language. My father spoke a little bit of the Abenaki language. It's a part of our heritage, and it's something that I'm very proud and carry with me everywhere and try and share. And it was certainly carried along the waterways here as people would travel. Today we traveled by car, on the roads. Long ago, those would be canoes, as in the title, along the rivers and, of course, the lakes. Those would be the highways that people would travel upon. And for a number of reasons, songs would be sung. For one, it is said to be disrespectful to speak while paddling on the river. As a fisherman, an omat, one who is fishing, we know that it's not a great idea to make a lot of human noises if we want to catch anything, so it's good to be quiet. Also to respect when they say lives in Bitao Bagok, the name of not only Lake Champlain but Lake George. It is said even within native tradition long ago that there was a serpent that may hear you and come up and get you. And of course that tradition's been passed down to become champ. Pataskok. So for that reason, but also canoe songs were sung to keep paddlers together as we paddled. So we could paddle in unison. You could speed up the song or slow it down as we came to rapids or to a Quazon Wangwong Desek and Oxbow. And then most importantly and most appropriately, to greet, to allow those in perhaps the village around that oxbow know exactly who you were, to announce your coming. Greeting songs were sung. So when you knew you were approaching a village, you would begin to sing the song of your community. So there were many different greeting songs, all sung in the canoe, and then there were responses from the shore which would say, "We welcome you. We welcome you here." So we're going to share with you two versions. One, a greeting song that would be sung as paddlers were approaching, asking for permission to land their canoes and share some things. We have a little bit of time to do just that tonight. So I'll move along with that song and say that you all know a bit of Abenaki too. In fact, the word that's most appropriate in the Abenaki language right now is mosey. I need to mosey along. So the word that is borrowed from Abenaki, it means to move along to our greeting song. And this says, hello to all of you. The word gua is the same as that word kwai, an old version of hello, and then you'll hear the response from the shore to bring our, to pull up our wigwa ulao, our canoes. Yo guano de yo guano da, yo guano de yo guano da. Gaiawani hey ayok yo hey, 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 hey guano de yo guano da, yo guano de yo guano da, Gaiawani hey ayok yo hey, Gaiawani ayok yo hey, Gaiawani hey ayok yo hey, Gaiawani hey ayok yo hey, guano de guano de guano de guano da de, guano de guano de hey, guano de guano da de, guano de guano de hey, guano de guano de. Guano de guano da de, guano da de. We are from the area that is called Saratoga, Saratoga, Nabizonbik, the place of good water.
And Saratoga Lake has its own stories connected with that which Jesse just mentioned, that idea of respect for the waters and what is within them. In fact, about 150 years ago, before they completed a road all around Saratoga Lake, which you can drive on today, you could only go halfway around. And that was where a group of people, Mohawk Indians, had set up a ferry service. So you go from one side of the lake to the other for a few cents. Climb in the canoe, and you would paddle across. However, the one rule was that you would never talk while you're in the canoe, because it was said that there was a powerful presence beneath the water of the lake, and if you spoke, your canoe would be turned over. Now, there was a person, some say it was a man, some say it was a woman, it doesn't matter, it was just that they were a European American. And they heard of this superstition and thought, I will teach these ignorant savages a lesson. And so that person went and hired the canoe to go across the lake. When they were in the exact middle of the lake, that person went, "Ah!" in a really loud voice. Nothing happened. And the men paddling the canoe said nothing, just continued on to the other side. That person sat there thinking, I've shown these ignorant people the foolishness of their superstitions. But as the canoe was pulled into land, one of those Mohawk men turned to the other and said, you know, the spirit of the lake is very understanding and understands that white people just can't keep their mouths shut. There are many stories we tell of canoes. In fact, if you just go up here to the Double Water, which is Lake George joined into Lake Champlain, there is one or two islands, actually there are one or two islands where the rattlesnakes swim out every year. In fact, I know a person who works as a ranger on one of those islands, and every year they catch at least 2 or 3 rattlesnakes very quietly and then take them back across to the Tongue Mountain Range where they came down. The story is that a long time ago, one of my ancestors was paddling that way across the lake, dipped his canoe into the water to admire the beauty of the day, and felt the canoe paddle tremble a little bit and looked down, and a very large rattlesnake had just crawled up the canoe paddle, crawled across his arm, and crawled into the boat. He sat there looking at that rattlesnake, which looked up at him, then went and crawled up to the bow of the boat and looked back at him, and he went, okay. Paddled back to shore. As soon as he reached there, the snake slid in and went into the undergrowth and was gone. You see, the stories of water are everywhere. We all are water. And water is necessary for us to live. Without water, nothing would be possible. People sometimes ask me, as a matter of fact, do you Abenakis do rain dances? And my reply is the same as the reply of my dear friend Maurice Dennis, Madawilasis, who for years lived in the little town of Old Forge, New York. In fact, if you've ever been to Old Forge and to what is now the water slide world, there was, when it was the Enchanted Forest, an entire village of Abenaki structures and various things that were part of Abenaki lifeways, such as basket making, that were constructed by Maurice Dennis. Maurice was a man who was deeply connected to so many things. His name, Madawilasis, means little loon. For the loon is a powerful bird in our Abenaki traditions. Madawila is a medicine person or a shaman. Madawilasis, the loon, can fly, can swim, and can dive deep below, and then can come out upon the land. All 3 worlds are the worlds owned by the loon. And Maurice Dennis, Madawilasis, told me a number of stories. Stories that talk about the way we are connected to all living things. For example, when we see a dog is a member of your family. And one of the old stories we tell. And I'll tell this story to you. And as I tell it, to keep you as part of the story and make sure you haven't fallen asleep. If I say ho, I want you to say hey. Ho? Hey. Ho? Hey. Ho? Hey. Very good. Long ago it is said that Gluskabe, the helper of the human beings who had great power from Kutsinawask, the great mystery, looked around and saw that there were many giant creatures, many animals, very large in those days. And Gluskabe thought to himself, how will these beings treat the new ones when they come, the Almobak, the weak ones, the ones who have no fur, the ones who have to put things on their feet to walk through the woods and must put animal skins around their shoulders so they don't freeze. They're the weakest ones in creation. I wonder how these powerful beings will treat them. Ho? Hey. So he called a meeting for all those creatures to come together, and he spoke to them one by one, asked what they would do. The first he spoke to was Kashiawasos, the great bear. So large the ground shook beneath his feet. So tall he dwarfed the tallest trees. And Gluskabe said, what will you do when you see a human being? And that great bear said, I will swallow him whole. Gluskabe thought about that. I do not think human beings will enjoy being swallowed by bears. I should do something. And so Gluskabe said, my friend, you appear to have some burrs caught in your fur. Would you sit down in front of me and I'll comb them out with my fingers? And as he did that, that bear got smaller and smaller till he was the size that bears are today. When Gluskabe asked a second time, what will you do when you see a human being? That bear said, I'll run away. Now the next animal he spoke to is one you all know. It is one whose name has passed into the English language, the one we call moose. Moose or moose literally means the one who is angry, or the strange one. In fact, when you are angry, it is said you are moose walda, you are thinking like a moose. And that moose was so large that his antlers were bigger than the biggest trees and sharper than the sharpest spears. And when that moose came up to Gluskabe said, what will you do when you see a human being? That moose said, I will spear them with my horns, roll them over the trees, stomp on them with my feet till they're flat as your hand. Gluskabe thought about that. I do not think the human beings will actually appreciate being flattened by moose. I had better do something. And so once again, he thought how he could use his power, and he said to that moose, my friend, moose, you appear to be very strong. Let us have a little contest. I will hold up my hands, and you try to push me backwards. The moose agreed, put his nose into one of Gluskabe's hands, his antlers in the other, began to push. But each time he pushed, he got smaller. And his antlers became rounder. And there's a mark right on his forehead. They say it's the palm of Gluskabe. When he was done, that moose was not so big anymore. Gluskabe said, and now what will you do when you see a human being? And that moose said, I will run away. And that is what moose usually does. By the way, the moose, loves to live in the water. In fact, sometimes when you go up to the Adirondacks, if you're lucky, you'll see a little hump sticking out of the water, and all of a sudden a moose will raise his head up. There was a game that Abenaki kids used to play. They'd take their canoe, wait till they saw a moose feeding, quietly paddle up to it, and then one would jump on the moose's back and grab his ears, or her ears, and ride it through the water until it reached the shore, at which point they got off very quickly. Now, one by one, Gluskabe spoke to those animals until finally there was only one left, sitting in the middle of the clearing, wagging its tail. It was, of course, dog. And Gluskabe said to that dog, what will you do when you see a human being? Will you harm them in some way? And that dog said, oh, no, I want to be their best friend. I've been waiting for them to come. I want to live in their houses and play with them, share their food, do everything with them. Gluskabe looked at that dog. Could see he had a good heart. He said, Nitomba, my friend, you will be a better friend than many human beings deserve. And so it is, you will always live with them and walk beside them. We shall call you Alamos, the one who walks with us. And that, they say, is how dog got his name. That was only one of the many stories that Madawilasis, Maurice Dennis, had as part of his Abenaki heritage, a heritage we try to share in our own way with words and stories and songs. And thinking of songs, the songs of the birds, thinking of the loon. You ever hear a loon cry? The call of the loon. By the way, if you're very quiet, you're on one of our Adirondack lakes. I remember one year I was up on Deer Pond, up in the Goulie Club section of the Adirondacks near Indian Lake, and I heard a whistling sound, and it was a loon circling the pond. Then I heard whistling at a slightly different note, and it was a second loon. And then I heard another whistle, and it was a third loon. Each one's wings had their own sound as they circled on that lake to land. Thinking of the songs, that is yet another part of our tradition, the flute. I'll let Jesse tell you a bit about the flute.
In Wazonem Nimitongos Pikonganyodali, Kanwa Agama, he allows me to borrow it. It's my father's flute, and I'm lucky enough because he lets me use it whenever we perform together. The flute is inspired by the songs of birds, but it of course comes from, in this case, the red cedar, which is a really common really common wood that is used for making flutes by native peoples. And we see often on top of the flute there is carved, in this case, the head of a bird, to remind us not of a loon, but of birds in general, because it's their songs that inspire most music, but especially one bird, Omba Sas, the woodpecker. It is said that long ago a young man was in the woods and he was listening and paying attention, as my father mentioned he was doing, and heard as the wind blew across a red cedar branch that was hollowed out by a woodpecker, it made a beautiful sound. Which gave him the idea to create the first flute. I'd just like to create something for you today, improvise a piece, thinking of the birds and thinking of the wind and the red cedar trees. Let's make a song for you to hear. Share a song or a story that comes and talks a bit more on the humorous side. It is important to tell stories for at least two reasons. As my father often says, we get a chance to meet with children in schools, and long ago there were no cars and there were no roads here, and there were no schools. And we like to remind kids that they still had a lot of things to learn. We had to learn how to survive. And one way to learn is through observation, being good, paying attention. But the other thing is being a good listener. In fact, the first thing is to be a good listener. And music reminds us of that. It catches our attention. We can learn from music. We can learn, if nothing else, just how to pay attention. And by paying attention, especially to a good story, the story itself will, one, bring us in because it's entertaining. So it keeps our attention. And two, within that time that our attention is there, that a child's attention is there, it can hold many, many lessons. Those lessons could be understood as the story is told, or maybe unpacked later on when they're really needed, when lessons are most important. And so it's not the tradition of most Native American people to just tell people the meaning or the reason why a story is told. Instead, a story is told for a specific reason that maybe the child doesn't understand, or the person will later come to realize themselves, giving it a much more powerful lesson. One of the most common stories that teach us pretty obvious lessons are the stories of the trickster characters. And the trickster here in the Northeast is not a coyote. There were no coyotes here until recently, until the wolves were driven out and coyotes came into the Northeast. The trickster here is the raccoon. The raccoon was here and raccoon is still here, but raccoon looks completely different than he did long ago. When the story times begin, when all the stories begin, raccoon has been changed because of his bad behavior, and a good story can teach us the results of bad behavior so that maybe we don't make those same mistakes that in these cases raccoon makes. I will warn you that raccoon almost always, like Wile E. Coyote in the old cartoons, almost always ends up dead. But don't worry, it's a story. He has to come back to life to teach more lessons. Ho! So no wat nongo ni Azban pompomo sat kapili kama agama andao wazo nemu and kaguya dialo ka agama gira oh niya andan wazo nemu and kaguya dialo ka. One day Azban was walking through the woods and he didn't have anything to do, and he started thinking to himself, I'm so bored. Well, he used his ears. He learned pretty well about listening. And when he listened, he heard Lintong Ganozi Walomi Git Sips Alomi Wi Abazi Beska Ontquenek Abilidzi. He heard the song of a bluebird, and there used to be beautiful bluebirds all over singing these beautiful songs, sitting on a branch that bluebird sang, and Azban followed his ears to that place and looked up at that bluebird and listened. Wow. It sounded so good. Uli Nongwat. Uli Tongwat. It sounded so good. Agama no damen. He listened to it. And when that bird was done, he said, oh, kwai waloi gitsit. Kakani nawa tapapi spiwi nia Azban. Hello, my friend. Bird, would you like to come on down and play with me? And that bird was a mother bird, and it was sitting on an azasa, spiwi owana, nest filled with eggs. And it looked down and said, Onda, Agama Pakara Kakhigazo, I'm not going to play with you. I know who you are. You're the trickster. And if I play with you, you'll probably just eat my owanao right out of my azasak. Oh? It was a smart bird. And Azban knew it. Azban looked up and said, Akuya Gwimda Ala Papi Ulitonia Kadopi. You can't blame me if playing makes me hungry. Well, Azban used his ears again. That bird was too smart for him. And this time he heard a different kind of sound. It sounded like this, way off in the distance. He'd never heard anything like it before. So he turned his ears in that direction and started to walk. Agama Pomosat Nidali. He walked there. As he walked, he came to a wadzo, a hill, and he aspi gondawa ni wadzoki. He climbed up that mountain. Say something quickly about Abenaki. A wadzo, a mountain, is alive. In fact, half the world is spoke of as who, not what. Where in English we always talk about everything is what is that, what is that, what is that. And only people are who is that. In Algonquian languages in general, which are about 80% of the languages spoken in many, many different languages, we'd speak of the world, half of the world, we'd say, who is that? For example, a tree, who is that tree? A mountain, who is that mountain? We never say, what is that mountain? And by speaking of it as a who, it had all of its own forms of verbs and adjectives, a whole language for the world of spirit, the world of who's, and that's every single living thing, and a lot of things we may not think of as living. Sacred things like pipes and tobaccos, all these things that are part of the spiritual world, all were who, and that mountain was who, was whom, I should say, he was climbing upon. Oh? And Azban climbed upon that wadzo until he came almost to the top. That sound had gotten so loud, but he'd come to a sibo. He'd come to a river. And he started to nozo come in sibo. He started to follow that river. Now, river is not a who. A river is a what. But the water in the river, if it's moving, the to go, the waves are who. Pretty amazing. The movement of water. In fact, to go not only means the wave, it also means that it is cold. Tuk, tekigan is the root for cold, so it doesn't mean, it means cold moving water, and that is considered living. Cold moving water. So right in the roots of the structure of the language, we see that understanding. We're not going to drink the dead, still warm water. So a river itself, he followed it. Nozokam, and he followed that river. And all of a sudden, there came a place where the river and Kadzigapskazo Ziwadzo met, where a cliff of that mountain and that river met, and that water began to benichla, fall. he created a panzahonk, or pontuk, a waterfall. And that was the sound. It was so loud now it was deafening. Ho! Azban could barely hear himself speak. Ho! But he was a trickster. Ho! And he wanted to prove that that waterfall, ho, was not as loud as he could be. Azban was known to be very loud, especially when people asked him not to be loud. Azban walked right up close to the edge of that Kadzigapskazo, where it was very slippery. Wazasa, he stood there where you should not stand, and he breathed in, filled up his little raccoon lungs, and he screamed Gongolawa as loud as he could. But no one could hear that little raccoon's voice. All they could hear in the valley below was that waterfall, was spraying water down on the rocks below, far, far below. Azban was not discouraged. He wasn't giving up. Nista, a second time, he breathed in more air, and he gongolawamina, he yelled again, even louder. Ho! But again, all you could hear was Azban was now getting musqualda. Anyone remember musqualda? Yeah, I guess you're going to be fluent. He was getting angry. So he walked, he figured, I got to get a little closer here so people can hear me. Got right at the edge. The rocks are really slippery. Breathe in. And he screamed, Gongolawamina, Kanwamina, Onda, Ukizi, no da, won, but again, you could not hear him. All you could hear was Panzahonk, the waterfall. He was so musqual dahla that he got really, his toes, his little raccoon toes were hanging right off. Wheatquazial, they were hanging, Wheatquazidal were hanging right off the edge of the cliff. He breathed in and breathed in and breathed in and went to Gongoloa. But this time when he went to Gongoloa, something that happens to all of us when we scream and yell way too much. He started to get a little Giwana squala. Giwanas, he was wandering around in his head, dizzy. He got all dizzy, he lost his balance, and he slipped, and he wakatassi and he fell. Ho! Hey. And now you could hear him. And hit the rocks below. Ho! Hey. Wasn't a good day for raccoon. Not a good place to play, and it wasn't a good idea, making all that noise on the water. And there he lay, he was shattered pieces on, but luckily he slowly came back together. He floated down the river. His body was filled with water. Oh, in fact, Nibi means water. Nibi. And medicine is Nibizon. Nibizon. So perhaps the water helped him, Nibizon. And as he floated down the river, pretty soon he came to a Quazon Wawon de Sec, place where the road, literally means where the road turns, but it means an oxbow. So the word for road from Abenaki comes from river. Pretty cool. It's the road. It's the path. It's the river. Where the path turns is an oxbow. And his body got guaguana, pushed right up onto Sinodziwi, the shore. And there it lay, all swollen in the sun. Ho! And a little songa sis. This is songa. Is a cool word. I just learned this. Our language is very closely related to other Algonquian languages, and out in the Midwest we have, in the North as well, in Canada we have Anishinaabe dialects, also called Ojibwe by the French, who the Americans couldn't pronounce Ojibwe, so they said Ojibwa. Chippewa is another word to say it. And they would say chaga. A chaga is a crab, chaga. And chaga was the name of something that would happen to birch trees when they would die. Chaga would grow on them. And now people are collecting that chaga and using it. And that comes from songa. So you hear the difference in the dialects. Songa, chaga, it means a crab. This was a little crab, songasis. And that songasis thought it saw the man-eater. That's what they called raccoon, because raccoons love to eat crayfish. That little crayfish, little tiny guy, looked up as hard as he could, and as he looked, he changed himself. His eyes popped right up out of his head, and they stuck up out of the water. Oh! And that little guy looked and saw, indeed, that was Raccoon, and Raccoon, the man-eater, was dead. Songa sis, he was so excited, that little crayfish, that he began to swim. He was so excited that he swam backwards. And ever since then, all the crayfish have swum that way through the water. Ho! Right to his village at the bottom of the river. And when he got to that village, he started to tell his story. He told everybody what he'd seen. He said, oh, my friends, I saw Azban Matsina Nikwombi. I saw Raccoon. Raccoon is dead now. And they asked, how do you know he's truly dead? Well, he didn't, no one saw what happened, and he decided that he would tell a little bit of a pisonzanique, little tiny lie. He said, I know he's dead because in Nihon, I killed him. You killed the raccoon? And crayfish, I killed the raccoon. And then people kept asking more and more, and the story got bigger and bigger and bigger. Next thing you knew, he was sitting in front of the Songomon, the chief of all the Songasisak, of all the crayfish people. And he was telling his story to the chief. And the chief was excited, but the chief was smart. The chief said, we should have a great feast. That man-eater will feed all of our people. In fact, crayfish will climb right up and eat dead animals. It was their time to get a little revenge on that raccoon who ate so many of their people. So they all gathered together and they traveled, following that new way of traveling. They all shot backwards across the water and came to the shore, following that little Songasis. And the chief said, oh, indeed, he looks to be dead, but since you fought and killed him and you are so brave, could you just get up out of the water and go stand next to him, maybe poke him to make sure before all the people come out? Can we all say Abenaki translation for is yes. Very simple word. He agreed, and he climbed up carefully out of the water and went near that raccoon and poked that raccoon. And the raccoon just lay there. It was dead. Uli Matsina, good and dead. Ho! But the Songomon wasn't convinced yet. He yelled out of the water, if he's truly Uli Matsina, you wouldn't be afraid to stand up on his belly? He agreed, and he told his story. So he climbed up on the belly of that raccoon and waved. Uli Matsina, he's good and dead. But the chief wasn't happy. He said, if he's good and dead, you wouldn't be afraid to climb up next to all those sharp teeth and stand right on his face. And he did that. He climbed up on the face and waved and said, oh, Uli Matsina, he's good and dead, ho? Hey. The chief wasn't happy. A fourth time, he noticed a pattern, 4, Yao No, very important number, happening all the time in stories. The 4 directions, the 4 seasons, all always coming back to that. And in the 4th time, the chief asked, reach down with your claw and pinch Azban's nose and twist it. We need to be sure that he's Uli Matsina. Your story, you killed him. You must be sure. And he said, And he reached down and he pim squawaganawa. My kids love that word. Pim squawaganawa. It means pinched. Pim squawaganawa. Ta lata ginigan. And he spun it around. Lata ginigan. He spun that nose around. Now, at about that time, Raccoon's nose started working again. And it didn't hurt at all. In fact, that nose had the most beautiful uli mongwa ever. The smell of a little crayfish. And a little crab was standing. He thought, crayfish. And he knew that if there was one crayfish, there were probably more crayfish nearby. So Azban just lay there and pretended to be dead and waited. And just then, that crayfish yelled, Agama uli matsina, and the chief yelled, Wahoo, wahoo, Agama uli matsina. Indeed, he is dead. And all the crayfish people came out of the water and they began to sing a song of celebration. They sang, we gai wane, we gai wane, we gai wane, we gai wane. And they danced in a circle around Azban's dead body, which was less and less dead every time they danced around. That smell was, so good. Ho? We gai wane, 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 we gai wane. And dancing and singing makes you tired and it makes you hungry. And just when all those crayfish people sat down on their crayfish bottoms, Azban stood up, and said, kwai kwai nidobak, thank you for inviting me to this feast. I'm so hungry. And those crayfish were so tired that Azban had a very, very great feast. And that is the end of that story. Thank
you. We call this presentation Two Rivers, and I should point out that what I'm holding in my hand is a little book that the two of us did. not too long ago, which is called Two Rivers. And on the cover, you'll see a reproduction of a very famous Haudenosaunee Iroquois wampum belt called the two-row wampum. It shows a white background and two purple lines parallel, which stand for two canoes going down the river. In this case, it was the canoes of the Haudenosaunee, the Mohawk, and the canoes of the Dutch people, neither one interfering with the other, all of them sharing that water together. And what we did in this book was to write poems with Abenaki on one side and English on the other. So I'll share with you the title poem of this book.
Nisnol Siboa.
Two Rivers.
Pazgwin litan ahki, pazgwin litan mli wonganek nisnol Siboa, kanwa awak pazgwin.
One flows from the earth, one flows from the heart. Two rivers, but they are one.
Pazgwin umila abaziko, pazgwin umila mitzitzakok, nisnol Siboa, kanwa awak pazgwin.
One gives to the trees, one gives to the spirit. Two rivers, but they are one.
Awaasak, sipsak, namasak, maskidzam onkosisak, mziwi knigik, pomosa hadit, dekas mihidit, pim migwazihidit, bemido ozihidit, kados moak, pazgwin sibok, eni mila pomozuonga.
The animals, the birds, the fish, the insects, all of those who walk, those who swim, those who crawl, those who fly, drink from one river. It gives them life.
Mziwi lida hon zidit. Ombadala mihidit, melis zonhidit, pazgwin sibo nozana ali gongol noak ta giki.
All of those who think, those who laugh, those who weep are touched by one river that holds them and heals.
Pazgwin sibo inda nina no pairi undaki nasawan.
One river, no further away than breath.
Pazgwin sibo lalamongan pa koli pa holiganek.
One river, its voice the beat of the drum.
Nisnol siboal zi tanal, nisnol siboal kanwa awak pazgwin.
Two rivers flow together. Two rivers, but they are one. I'm going to share another canoe song, and then maybe my father will share a story. This one says, Pa'ami wigawon ziwi ato lakano banikwi ra'olalam ziwi, which is a direct line. One of the things that I worked really hard on doing is speaking like people spoke the language long ago, and it's hard because there are fewer and fewer speakers. I was lucky enough to live with and work with for over a decade Cecile Wawanolet, who's a direct descendant of Greylock, a famous Abenaki hero who led many quote-unquote massacres against the English settlements. Her family helped to preserve the language. Her son, Joseph Wawanolet Joubert, is still living. We've worked together for a decade since his mother's passing in trying to preserve the Abenaki language. In 1992, when I began learning to speak it fluently, I heard it in my home as a child. I heard it from Maurice Dennis. But I really, when I was 18, I started to really focus on learning it. There were close to 50 speakers in the reservation of Odanak, Quebec, where many people from this region and to the east and north of us fled as refugees, and the language has survived. Today there are, I believe there is one, Margie Hoff, and she is 98 years old. So a lot has changed in 25 years. And we're working very hard to create a new generation. I will say songs like this, which are based on the exact words of, this was recorded in 1959. Ambrose Obamson says, more often than not, long ago, we used to travel around by canoe. And we just talked about that. So I made it a song. I said, let's make that a song so we can learn to say that, because it's a bit of wisdom, it's a bit of culture, and it's something that we can preserve with this song. Ta'ami wigawon, ziwi ato, lakano banik, wigwala, ziwi, yahin away, yahin away, yahin away, okay, yahin away, yahin away, yahin away, yahoa. Ta'ami wigawon, ziwi ato,
we waddle along and see we yapping away, yapping away, yapping away, oh hey, yapping away, yapping away, yapping away, oh Tommy we go, see we ato, la canoe we waddle along and see we yapping away, yapping away, yapping away, oh hey, yapping away, yapping away, yapping away, oh.
I'm going to share with you another song that deals with the Hudson River. Another story, I should say. There's a song in another story I'm going to tell, but not this one. What's in this one is a flute. That's song too, isn't it? Now, long ago, they say, along the banks of the Mahicanituc, the river that flows in two directions, or the Mohican River, the one you call the Hudson, there was a village of people not too far from Schenectady, the opening among the trees, which is now called Albany, not Schenectady. But you figured that out for me, it's Dutch logic. And in that village, there was a young woman whose name was Swaying Reed. She was called that because she was graceful and lovely, like a reed moving in the wind. She was a beautiful young woman, and she knew it. In fact, she knew she was so beautiful that no one was good enough for her. Young men would come and speak to her mother, for that is the way it would be done. You'd speak to a young woman's mother for permission to talk with her, and the mother would say, "Go ahead, it will do no good." And indeed it did, for each man who spoke to her or tried to speak to her, "You are too fat. You are too skinny. You are too tall. And you're too short. None of you are good enough for me, for I am Swaying Reed, and I am quite beautiful." By the way, this is the way you say beautiful in Native American Sign Language, as if you're looking into a mirror. I am quite beautiful. So it went on. Everyone was not quite good enough for Swaying Reed. Ho? Hey. One day, though, she was walking not far from the village, and as she walked along, not far from the river, she began to hear a sound. The sound of a flute being played. She followed that sound. It seemed to entrance her. In fact, in the old days, when you fell in love with someone, you would compose a flute song for them and play it for them. If they accepted it, then you would be married. And by the way, that song would no longer be played on the flute. It would now be played on the rattle, words composed by that woman as lullabies for the children that would come. But this song that she heard did not sound like a lullaby. A strange song, and yet entrancing. And she came to a clearing, and there she saw a young man sitting on a log playing that flute. He was the best looking young man she had ever seen. And he wore clothing which was all covered with shiny wampum. It glittered in the sun. And she thought, he looks as if he would be good enough for me. And she walked over to him and she said, "Ah, I like the music you're playing." And he said, "Yes, you like it." She thought, his voice is a little strange, but he's really good looking. He said, "Would you like to come with me?" And she said, "Oh," for indeed, he was the best looking man she had ever seen. And he held out his hand as he stood up and took her hand, and his hand was very cold. Surprisingly so, but she thought, I will warm him up. He said, "Come with me to meet my mother." He thought, well, this is good. This is proper. I should meet his mother. And he began to walk, holding her hand. As they walked along, mist began to rise around them until she could not even see her hand in front of her face. It was so misty, and they began to walk downhill, and she thought, this is strange. I don't remember a hill anywhere near here. And she noticed the earth was very soft and sandy under her feet as she walked. Ho! Hey. And then the mist cleared away, and in front of her, she saw a village, the strangest village she'd ever seen. For it was not made of bark covering wigwams, not elm bark or birch bark, nor even logs. Each of those wigwams, which means house, was made entirely of stone. And all around those stone houses, there were no plants growing, it was just sand. And in front of every single house, there sat a person wearing the same beautiful, shiny, wampum clothing as that young man who was holding her hand and leading her into the village. As they walked along, he said, "This is my house here." It was the biggest house in the village. She thought, whoa, he must be a chief. He led her into the house. An old woman sat there across from the opening to the lodge. In front of her was a cooking pot, but there was no fire. She said, "Oh, my son, Kamek, what have you brought today?" He said, "Mother, I brought this young woman. See, I brought her." And that old woman said, "Ah, this is good. Sit down, sit." Well, Swaying Reed sat. That old woman said, "Here, have some food." And she dipped a bowl into that pot and handed it across to Swaying Reed, who took the bowl, was about to eat from it when she noticed that what was in that bowl was not corn or beans or squash. It was grubs, worms, mice, little things crawling around. She put the bowl down and said, "I'm not hungry right now." Amalkamek, for that was his name, said, "Oh, what would you like to eat?" As he spoke those words, she looked out the door of that wigwam, and what she saw filled her with fright. She almost screamed, for what she saw looking through that wigwam door was that in front of each of those stone houses sat not people, but huge snakes, their scales glittering like wampum. That's when she remembered something. Amalkamek is the name of the great snake who lives beneath the surface of the water, who is known to lure away young women who are never seen again. Now, Swaying Reed, although she was vain, was not stupid. She said to herself, "I cannot show fear. What can I do to escape?" Then she got an idea. She said, "Yes, I am hungry, but there's only one thing I want to eat." "Ah, what is it? Whatever it is, I will get it, for I am the greatest hunter of all." "Ah," she said, "what I want is an elk which only has one horn with 3 tines on it, with a black spot in the middle of its forehead and a white spot on its chest." "Oh," he said, "I will go get that." And he left the wigwam, and as soon as he walked out, he turned into a snake and crawled away. That was when that young woman, Swaying Reed, looked around, leaped up and began to run. She ran across that sandy earth. She ran as fast as she could, and she heard a voice call to her. That voice said, "Granddaughter, come this way. Granddaughter, I will help you." And as she ran, suddenly she found herself not running, but swimming on the surface of the river. And that voice spoke again from the sky, said, "I am the Thunderer. I am the enemy of Amalkamek. He will come for you, and I will save you. But swim now." And she began to swim. And as she swam toward the shore, ho! Hey. From behind her she heard, "My friend, wait, I have it for you!" she looked up and there was a Monkamek swimming across the surface with an elk in his mouth, with one horn, with the same number of tines, and the white spot and the black spot. She thought to herself, he really is a great hunter. And she swam faster, for as she swam, she could see the cloud in the sky that had seemed very distant was getting closer and darker and darker. She swam as fast as she could. A Monkamek was about to reach her, when all of a sudden, a great bolt of lightning struck the water. And she found herself drowning as she put her feet down and realized she was touching the bottom and she was next to the shore, and she climbed out, looked up in the sky and saw that cloud disappearing, and she called out, "Grandfather Thunder, thank you for saving me." She walked back to her village. Not long after, she married a young man who was not very good looking, not very tall, but had very warm hands. And that is the story of Swaying Reed and the Monkamek.
Wadzonam Kadakpi Kongan Sibi Nisno. I have a flute that has two flutes within it to create harmony. And I think one of the ideas too of the two rivers is that idea that we can come together and create harmony and create beautiful new things. And we're doing that by doing our best to preserve those things that the Abenaki culture and other native cultures still have to offer us. Certainly a respect for water and all those things that may dwell within it. We heard in that story. So I'd just like to share a song and one more story with you tonight. This case with the double flute, which has one chamber which is droning, kind of like a bagpipe, and then another one where I can change the notes. Noa nongo niwi Gluskabe pompomo sat kapiwi. Ta agama u nodamo kaguyon sagi tongguat. Tawalo yauno ba kida liula tamana widzo ka bena. Widzo ka mi na. One day long ago, Gluskabe, we heard about Gluskabe in our first story tonight. Gluskabe, that one who had the power to change things. The one who came before human beings, who it is said was shaped right here. Gluskabe was shaped from the dust that was left over from creation. That dust sprinkled upon the earth and started to bring itself together. It shaped a body, a head, arms, legs, and when those legs were shaped and it stood, it left two lakes. It left Lake Champlain and it left Lake George. In that place where Gluskabe stood and began to walk upon the earth after shaping himself. He tried to make the world better for the coming of his grandchildren, all of us, the human beings. At the beginning of this story, Gluskabe heard something strange. It was human beings crying, "Help us, help us." And so Gluskabe, always like a grandparent will do, went to help his grandchildren. He ran as quickly as he could to the village of the people, and there he found the people were in a terrible, terrible state. They looked like they'd been starving. He asked, "What has happened?" They said, "Oh, everything is failing. The river, it is dried up. We have no water for skamon, wasawa, ta'adabakwa, for the corn, squash, and beans, the three sisters. We have no water to drink. We have no water to cook with. We have no water to clean ourselves. Our lives are very hard without the river. We'd hoped it would return, but every day it went further and further down. So we sent warriors up the river. Most of them never returned, and those who did return came with stories of a terrible monster who says nothing but give them none." Gluskabe had heard enough. Gluskabe stepped down into that empty riverbed and began to follow it. He walked along that river, which had no water in it at all. Ho! And sure enough, he came around, and as he rounded the corner there, he saw a giant Kibinigan, a giant dam, like he'd never seen before. Ho? Hey. He'd seen Tamakwa, the tree cutter, the beaver dam before. And sometimes beaver dams got quite big, but he'd never seen one like this. This one completely shut that river down. It was completely closed, and Gluskabe just yelled up over the dam, Liulal Damana, Mili Nabi, please give me some water. And he heard a voice from the other side of that dam say, give them none, give them none, give them none. Ho? Hey. Well, Gluskabe tried again. Liulal Damana, Mili Nabi. He heard that voice again, and then he saw warriors standing on top. Strange men like he'd never seen before, holding spears. After he asked 4 times, they threw wet mud down upon him. Azasko. Ibita Azasko. That's all our chief says you can have, just mud. Well, Gluskabe didn't get angry. He decided to do something. He used his magic and he stomped on the ground. When he stomped, he began to grow. He stomped 4 times, and after that 4th stomp, he was taller than the tallest white pine tree, and he was much taller than that dam. He could now look over the other side where he saw a great abyss, a great lake. And in that lake, there was some kind of creature just floating. The strangest creature with great big bulging eyes and long, strange fingers reaching out. And Gluskabe just reached out and grabbed a great big dead white pine tree and pulled it from the ground and smashed its dam. Ho? Hey. Well, that creature we call Agalabemu or Agalabalam was angry, and it dove and attacked Gluskabe. Ho? Hey. For destroying his dam. Ho? Hey. To give them none, and grabbed him, and they began to wrestle back and forth. But Gluskabe was very strong. He defeated the moose. He defeated the bear by simply petting him. And he decided to defeat Agalabemu by simply squeezing him. Zalig Zagana. He squeezed, ta Zalig Zagana, and squeezed, ta Zalig Zagana, and squeezed. Ho! Hey. But this one, this Agalabemu, was so big and so full of water. It had been laying in that water, just drinking it all, that every time Gluskabe squeezed, water would shoot out of its ears, out of its nose, out of its eyes, even out of its fingers. Ho! Hey. And every time it got smaller and smaller, and its back became more and more bent and broken from Gluskabe squeezing it and squeezing it and squeezing it and crushing it until finally he squeezed all of the nabi out of that Agbalam, that little bullfrog. Oh? Hey. And he looked at that bullfrog and said, no way you can take all the water now, and let it go. And that bullfrog, Ligadahit, jumped off into a swamp where to this day, if you go down to the swamp, you'll hear him say, give them none, give them none, give them none. Luckily, they fit in the palm of your hand. They can no longer take all the water. Oh? And that river flowed. As they wrestled, it flowed around all those Cozon de Segal, all those curves in the river. It flowed back to the people. And the people saw that water. And they were so excited. Some of them said, I will swim forever. The water is so important to me. And they dove into that water and they became the very first Msquamag, the redfish, the very first salmon. And we say ever since then, the people have swum in the river, always being thankful for it being free and flowing. And that is the end of that story. Thank you.
Such good listeners. I have to say that you're really living up to what Maurice Dennis and other elders like, say, Ray Fadden, who was a wonderful Mohawk elder who taught me a canoe song I'm going to share with you in a minute. They both said, every human being has 2 ears and 1 mouth. Because we're supposed to listen twice as much as we talk. And when we hear the sound of the drum, that double beat is the same as the heartbeat. It's the first music you heard even before you were born, when you were literally swimming inside your mother. You could hear her heart beating. You were there in that first water of life. So when we hear the drum, it reminds us, always listen to our mothers. And we say the drum beat is the heartbeat of the Mother Earth. One of my dear friends was, well, I won't say a man name, I'll say Pete Seeger. And every year at the Clearwater Revival Festival, Pete would play and sing this song that he heard from Dahana Dolan's Ray Fatton, the Seneca Canoe Song. Maybe you could help me with this. Yeah. Kaio wajine, kaio wajine, kaio wajine, yo ho, hey, kaio wajine, kaio wajine, kaio wajine, yo ho, hey, kaio wajine, kaio wajine, kaio wajine, yo ho, hey, kaio wajine, kaio wajine. You can try that with me. Try this. Kiowa. Kiowa jine. Ho ho hey ho. Kiowa jine. Kiowa jine. Now we'll try singing it. Kiowa jine yo ho hey ho. Kiowa jine. Kiowa jine. Kiowa jine yo ho hey. Kiowa jine. Kiowa jine. Kiowa jine yo ho hey. Kiowa jine. Kiowa jine. Woo!
We'll do a song of thanks. It's important to remember to be thankful. We just had Thanksgiving, a holiday inspired by Native people, inspired by an Abenaki who walked out of the woods and somehow Samoset said, "Hello, friends, do you have any beer?" to the pilgrims, and then he realized they didn't have any beer, they had almost nothing, and he went and got his friend Squanto. The Squantum came and spoke even better English with them, bilingual for a long time, and it's a time to remember. We say thanks for it, but I think it's important to remember this time of year was the harvest, the end of the harvest. Everybody was getting together and being thankful in Native communities, as we would around the world when we bring in our harvest. But the idea of being thankful all year round within each moon, the moon is named after that thing which we're most thankful for, whether it's the moose hunting moon or the strawberry moon, the corn harvesting moon. And so this is just a song of Thanksgiving, and there's a time to be thankful always, to always recognize or acknowledge those things that we have, because when we don't acknowledge them, we don't see them, they don't seem to appear at all. So it's always important to remember them, and this is a song that does that. It says thank you to all of you, thank you Todd, and people who made this happen. Kitsi Ulioni Nimitongus, thank you for my phone. So, song of Thanksgiving and our closing song. Hey go, hey gane, quayo hey, guanal dia guan.